Hello, boys and girls and babes. Welcome back to the Janaea Talks Caps podcast. Today, as we patiently endure more of this seemingly never-ending off-season, we are going to take a look at the Capitals' salary cap situation now and into the future. Currently, the Caps sit almost $1.4 million over the salary cap ceiling of $81.5 million. With 23 players, that's 14 forwards, 7 defensemen, and 2 goalies on their active roster. 23 is, of course, the maximum number of players a team is allowed to carry on the active roster. So one easy way to get under the cap would be to ditch one or two of those players by sending them to the minors. But while that may be the easiest option, it may not be the best option. So today we're going to look at all of the options that the Capitals have in order to get under the salary cap ceiling before the league's deadline of October 2nd, as well as the pros and cons of each of those options. So like I said, the first, easiest, and least creative option would be for the Caps to send one or two guys from their active roster down to the minors. So who are the candidates for such a demotion? Well, the top two candidates up front have to be Chandler Stevenson and Travis Boyd, who count a combined $1.85 million against the Capitals' salary cap currently. On the back end, the two candidates would likely be Jonas Siegenthaler and Christian Djoos, although Siegenthaler's waivers exempt status means that he would almost certainly be the one to be demoted. Siegenthaler has a cap hit of a little over $700,000. However, the problem with demoting a defenseman is that you are already only carrying 7 defensemen on the active roster. So, what happens is you demote one of them, and now you're carrying only 6. Obviously, 6 defensemen skate for you in every game, so you had better hope that nobody gets injured at that point. The same goes for the forwards. If you demote 2 forwards and don't call anyone else back up, then all of a sudden you're only carrying 12 forwards. Again, ideally, you're dressing 12 forwards every night, so again, this is kind of a pray that nobody gets injured type of scenario. Given that the Caps had a few injury problems last season, they have TJ Oshie and Michael Kempny, 1 forward and 1 defenseman, returning from major injuries that occurred late last season. Giving yourself 0 breathing room in case of injury is not ideal. However, you can always call up someone with a cheaper cap hit in order to have an extra body to fill the void. Specifically, in Chandler Stevenson's case, I think him electing to go to arbitration and then signing a contract at a $1.05 million cap hit may have been about the stupidest thing that he could do for his career at this time. Why do I say that, you ask? Well, his cap hit combined with the Capitals' salary cap situation makes it a virtual certainty that he will not be on the active roster for the Caps come opening night. There's a number of viable, cheaper options for the Caps, waiting in the minors with Shane Gersick, Axel Jonsson-Fjallby, and Brett Leeson ready to make the jump at cheaper cap hits, just to name a few. So yes, greed on Chandler Stevenson's part this offseason may have spelled the end of his time with a big club, at least for now. Another area where the Caps could also opt to save some cash this season would be at the goaltender position. While Holtby is obviously locked in as the starter at a more than reasonable $6.1 million cap hit, Phoenix Copley is looking a little expensive as the backup. Copley currently makes $1.1 million against the Caps salary cap. Ilya Samsonov, heir to the Capitals' goaltending throne and touted goalie of the future in Washington, he would only make $925,000 at the NHL level currently, as he's on his entry-level deal. And if they want to give him a little bit more developmental time in Hershey, then Vitek Vanacek, of a similar skill level to that of Phoenix Copley, he would only make $717,000 at the NHL level. So that's a lot of savings for the Caps if they were to ditch Copley for Vanacek at the NHL level. There's also always the trade route when you're looking to save some space against the salary cap. Although having already offloaded Matt Niskanen's contract, I'm not sure who else you'd really want to give up in a trade off of the active roster. Most of the spots are pretty set in stone, I'm of the mind, for right now anyways, that the Caps would be better off doing a bit of creative shuffling around the fringes of the roster rather than making a trade of a bigger cap hit player. If I had to guess, assuming that nobody gets injured before opening night on October 2nd, I would say the Caps are going to take the simplest route, even if it is a little bit risky, and just drop 2 forwards down to Hershey, at least for the beginning of the season. And those 2 forwards, if I had to guess, would be Chandler Stevenson and Travis Boyd. That gives me an early lineup projection for opening night, which would look like you'd have Nicklas Backstrom in the middle, flanked by Alex Ovechkin and Tom Wilson, followed by Evgeny Kuznetsov in the middle, flanked by Jakub Vrana and TJ Oshie. And then on the third line, we've got Lars Eller, flanked by Carl Hagelin and Richard Panik. And finally, on the fourth line, we've got the dependable Nick Dowd, flanked by Garnet Hathaway and Brendan Lepsick. Nobody is allowed to get injured up front. And then on the back end, we've got John Carlson reunited with his soulmate, Michael Kempny, Dmitry Orlov skating with Nick Jensen, and newcomer Radko Gudas on the third pair with either Christian Djoos or Jonas Siegenthaler. Although if I'm making the pick myself, then I'm definitely picking Christian Djoos. And then Braden Holtby obviously in the cage. And, I could also easily see the Caps keeping Travis Boyd as an extra forward and swapping Phoenix Copley for Vitek Vanacek, like I said, in order to save that extra cash instead. It all depends on which way they want to go, if they'd rather take the risk at the backup goalie position or if they would rather take the risk of a forward getting injured, and then you're suddenly really short on bodies up front. We will see which poison they pick, but I could see them going in either of those 2 directions to get under the cap. Either way, my early lineup projection for the guys who will actually be on the ice on opening night remains the same. Now, the other thing that's on everyone's minds, of course, is how whatever moves the Caps decide to make today might affect them going forward into the 2020-2021 season and beyond. Particularly how it might affect the decisions regarding new contracts for franchise cornerstones Nicklas Backstrom and Braden Holtby. Now, I know everyone has a mild heart attack as soon as we even start thinking about maybe possibly losing even one of those guys. And trust me, I am right there with you. They both belong in Washington. We know this. They know this. They've both said that they want to remain in Washington. They've both been adamant about the fact that they want to remain in Washington. And they've both said that as recently as this week. But I want to put a stop to at least one of those impending heart attacks, and I will do so by calling it right now. Nicklas Backstrom is 100% going to be re-signed by the Caps. I feel comfortable stating this as a fact because I truly believe that it is that much of a certainty and a foregone conclusion. He will be re-signed. Backstrom has already said he wants to stay, and more than that, Caps general manager Brian McClellan has basically already said that Backstrom is not going anywhere, whereas he's been less matter-of-fact about things when asked about Braden Holtby's future. So, it goes without saying, but obviously Brian McClellan wants to keep both of them, and both of them want to stay. But the fact is, if the Caps can only afford to keep one, then McClellan has already made up his mind long ago that one is going to be Nicklas Backstrom. And I don't think any fan of the Caps will have a problem with that. Outside of Alex Ovechkin, Nicky Backstrom is the Caps. And he needs to retire someday, having only worn a Capitals jersey, as does Alex Ovechkin. I'm going to go out on a limb, but not much of a limb because Brian McClellan has already hinted at this as well. But I'm going to say that there's even a pretty good chance that Nicky gets re-signed before the puck drops on this season on October 2nd. I just think both sides are absolutely not okay with losing the other, and they're going to work something out pretty quickly. As far as Holtby is concerned, I think those discussions will be longer, and they'll depend on how this season goes, both for Holtby and for the team as a whole. I think that if the team is still clearly a contender for the Cup, and for the record, I think they absolutely will be, then I think both sides will try to get something done. I think if there's some massive slip in the team's competency and suddenly they're not a contender anymore, then I think management would look at saving money against the cap by moving on to Ilya Samsonov. And likewise, Holtby would be okay with pursuing a new opportunity elsewhere. But again, I think the Caps absolutely will still be contenders, and thus I think both sides will try to get something done. The key word here being try. It's not going to be easy. Two pretty good comparables for Holtby, Sergei Bobrovsky and Andrei Vasilevsky. They both just signed massive new deals, long-term and with massive cap hits. Bobrovsky and Vasilevsky have both won the Vezina Trophy as the league's best goaltender, as has Braden Holtby, with the big difference being that Holtby has also won the Stanley Cup, and Holtby's career playoff numbers as a whole are a hell of a lot better than the career playoff numbers of either of Bobrovsky or Vasilevsky. In fact, you could probably put Bobrovsky and Vasilevsky in the same net at the same time, and they still would not stop as many pucks in the playoffs as Braden Holtby. So there's that. Bobrovsky has a .902 career save percentage in the playoffs, while Vasilevsky is a little better at .912. And then you have Braden Holtby, who soars high above both of them with a career save percentage of .928 in the playoffs. That's good for third best of all time in NHL history. Bobrovsky's cap hit on his new deal is a whopping $10 million, while Vasilevsky's is not much better at $9.5 million. Ouch. They're great goalies for sure, but it's sort of hard to justify paying a goalie that much in the salary cap era, as we've seen it time and time again how nearly impossible it is to build a good team around them when the netminder is making that much money. It just doesn't work most of the time. So even if the goalie is Braden Holtby, it's sort of hard to justify it still. He's worth the money, obviously. It's just that in the salary cap era, there's not enough money to go around when you're paying the goalie that much, and we've seen time and time again how it cripples the team trying to ice a good lineup in front of him. So it becomes a bit of a delicate balancing act. Now, I just want to throw it out there that I am all for keeping Braden Holtby, but for me, it has to be at the right price, that we can still ice a competitive team good enough to compete for the Stanley Cup in front of him. And I would think that Braden would want that too. He's a competitive guy. He wants to win, not just to get paid. And so I think in this situation, there's a middle ground that can possibly be found if the two sides work hard enough at it and are cooperative with one another in doing so. And you know what? I just want to touch on this as well. I hear a lot of people saying, well, we've got Samsonov on an entry-level deal anyways, so just let Holtby go. And I just think you have to be really, really careful with that. Yes, Samsonov is a great prospect. Yes, he's widely considered the best goalie not currently playing in the NHL. But he has also yet to play in a single NHL game, and I've just seen far too many guys, goalies in particular, not be able to successfully make that jump to the NHL level. So I just think you have to be really careful, because while he certainly is a very promising prospect right now, that's all he is. He's a prospect. We have not seen him play in the NHL. We don't know if the transition will be smooth or if it will be a disaster. That's pretty much 50-50 when it comes to goalies historically, even the really, really good ones, which Samsonov is. And so I just think you have to be really careful and not count your chickens before the eggs have hatched. And you should always try to go with the known commodity and Holtby first, if you can. If you can get a deal done with him at a reasonable price, do it. 100%, absolutely. And then if that plan fails, then you've got a pretty good plan B in Samsonov. But it should be your plan B, not your plan A at this point. And for what it's worth, I could see Holtby taking a bit of a hometown discount in order to stay in an organization that he loves with teammates who he loves. So we'll see. If the cap hit is going to be, reasonable-ish, then it's doable to keep him while still keeping Nicklas Backstrom and while still re-signing Alex Ovechkin 2 seasons from now. Obviously, that's the priority. Backstrom and Ovechkin, those guys are pretty much guaranteed to stay, or as close as you can get to a guarantee in professional sports. But if you can fit Holtby in there as well, then why the hell not? I've mentioned it already in a previous episode, but I think a guy like Evgeny Kuznetsov, with the whole recent Narcos drama, he's a guy who I would think had better have a pretty damn good season if he wants to remain here. Because guys like Backstrom and Ovechkin are getting new contracts. That's just a fact. And that the team wants to keep Holtby as well. So if Kuzi doesn't get it together, then I really think he could be on the trading block with the team opting to hang on to Holtby instead. And the same goes even for a guy like Dmitry Orlov, who has a large-ish cap hit, and he had a bit of a down season last season. He'd better be looking to prove that last season was just an anomaly and not the new norm for him, or else he could find himself on the trading block as well. So there's lots of options for the Caps, and it's going to be very, very interesting to see how it all shakes out over these next couple of years. But I think management has already made it very clear that the two guys needing new contracts who are not going anywhere are Alex Ovechkin and Nicklas Backstrom. As for the rest, we'll just have to wait and see how it all plays out, but it's going to be very interesting indeed. So until next time, Caps fans, keep it locked on our channel, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and or on Spotify if you haven't already. Like our Facebook page, Janae Talks Caps, to get all of the episodes as soon as they are released, and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram if you're so inclined as well. We would really appreciate it. And I'll give you all a little bit of homework for next time. Please, everyone, start getting back into shape for the season. Work on chugging your beers. Work on your aim when throwing your shoe at the television. Work on your profanity. Try to expand your vocabulary of curse words. We've only got about a month left here until the season begins, so let's make the most of it and be prepared. And as always, let's go Caps.